Have you ever been on a road trip and you see by the side of the road there's these historical markers that represent some significant event that happened in that location sometime in the past? Well, I'm not one that would stop and read those historical markers. Are you? Do you take the time to relive the past that happened in that one location, whether it's the birthplace of a famous person, or it could even be a place where there was a important battle or the birth of a city or something like that? Well, I'm not one that would really stop and do that. I'm kind of the person that goes from point A to point B, and I don't like to stop and dwell on those kinds of things. But the road of life has historical markers as well. And I'd like you to consider for this video, what are your historical markers? What are those things, what are those events, what are those experiences that have happened in your past that have helped shape you into the person that you are today? And for the purpose of this video, I'm really going to be focusing on the negative experiences, not the positive ones, because it's those negative experiences that as we relive them, we feel the pain of those negative experiences over and over again. It is time to lose the baggage associated with those negative experiences. It is time to learn what they are and then use them as a foundation to create a positive experience. Now, you know that you have a historical marker when you say these kinds of things. I feel sad, angry, mad, upset, hurt, offended because something. And that something is a story that you tell yourself about the past. And over the next few videos, we're going to be focused on your past experiences so that we can reduce the pain associated with those negative experiences, whether they be big or small. And when I say past experiences, what I'm really referring to are those things that happened 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 40 years ago, and those things that happened 1 minute ago, 30 seconds ago, yesterday, or 2 weeks ago. Anything that happened in the past that creates negative emotions, we want to reduce the baggage associated with those so that you can now feel the burden go away and feel more positive. Now, the pain that we feel from these negative experiences comes from a variety of sources. One of those sources is something I call emotional tagging or emotional pattern matching. For example, in 1987, we lived in Whittier, California. In October of that year, there was a 5.9 earthquake in Whittier, California. We lived very near the epicenter of that earthquake. It happened in the morning, and my 6-year-old daughter was in the kitchen, and everything started to rattle. The dishes fell out, they crashed on the floor, and my daughter was scared to death. In fact, she was so scared that for the next little while, she wouldn't leave our side. She started to wet the bed. She wouldn't go to sleep at night alone. She had to sleep with us, and she didn't want to go to school. Several years later, in fact, just last year, I realized that my daughter doesn't like to ride in elevators. And she's now 31 years old. And so for more than 25 years, she has been afraid of riding in elevators. And when I asked her why, she says, oh, because of the earthquake in 1987. You see, my daughter knows that there's really nothing wrong with an elevator. She knows that there's really nothing to be afraid. But because of that experience, she is afraid. It has caused her to have emotional tagging. And by emotional tagging, I mean it tagged her in such a way that she's now afraid of those things. Imagine a soldier that comes back from Iraq or Afghanistan and he has PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's now the 4th of July, and he can't go to a fireworks show because of the explosions or the loud firecrackers. In his mind, he knows that it has nothing to do with enemy fire. He knows it has nothing to do with bombs going off. But he's been tagged emotionally, and it causes him to have that anxiety. We all have these emotional tags, and we all have this emotional imprinting that goes in on our lives. For example, let's say that you have been rejected more than once. You may be afraid of rejection because it's created an emotional imprint. And that's where some of this baggage comes from. The other way that this baggage could come from is something that is called learned helplessness. Imagine a bird in a cage. And a bird that's been in a cage for a long time, you could probably open the door to that cage and they wouldn't fly away because they have learned to stay in that cage. Or a dog that's on a chain. You could have a dog on a chain that every day he pulls on the end of that chain and can't go anywhere else. You take the chain off and chances are he's not going to go very far because he's learned that he can't go very far. Learned helplessness is something that comes from the people around us. Imagine if your parents, when you were young, said that you were stupid, and they said that you were stupid over and over again. You're going to grow up thinking you're stupid. Now, is that right or wrong? I'm not going to talk about whether it's right or wrong. I'm just going to talk about the fact that sometimes we grow up with learned helplessness, and it's another form of incorrect pattern matching based on our past. Another thing that can happen to us is narrow self-labeling, that we label ourselves too narrowly because of what has happened to us. For example, let's say that you went through a messy divorce. You may say, I am a divorcee. Well, guess what? You're so much more than a divorcee. You should not identify yourself with what has happened to you in the past. Now, you're more than what's happened to you. And if you can then learn from those experiences, if you can now use it as a foundation, it can be something very positive for you. But as long as you narrowly label yourself and identify yourself so narrowly with what has happened to you, you're not going to be able to break out of that. And then I've met people who just have a love affair with the past. They talk about the good old days. They're so nostalgic that they can't experience greatness. They can't experience happiness in the present moment because they are so consumed with how great it was in the past. All of these things combined to cause us to focus more on the past than on the present. And we lose some of the happiness that we have right now because we're carrying baggage from the past. Our past creates this baggage that allows us to compare everything that happens to us today based on what has happened in the past. Now, I'm not saying that all of your experiences in the past have been bad. What I'm really asking you to do is to now look at those experiences that cause you pain, and now let's look at them a little bit differently so that you can learn from them and grow from them in such a way that it creates positive emotions, that it creates happiness. And so over this next week, here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to pay attention to when you tell stories. Tell stories to yourself, tell stories to others, and what are those stories that cause you pain, particularly stories from the past. And so here's a few things that I would like you to do in order to handle them a little bit better and to lose the baggage that comes with those negative experiences. I want you to pay attention to whenever you have a pity party. I want you to not lump things together and say, oh, because it happened in the past, it's going to happen in the future. Some of that is good so that you can be prepared and that you can learn from the past, but it doesn't mean that it's always going to be that way. I also want you to pay attention to when you're a doomsday psychic. And a doomsday psychic is to say, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, because you feel that the sky has fallen upon you in the past as well. The other thing I want you to be very careful of is something that I call identity theft. Do not let your identity be stolen by the past. I want you to recreate a new identity of happiness, a new identity of being positive and optimistic. And here's a couple ways that you can do that. Number one, as I mentioned in an earlier video, I want you to stay focused on today. I want you to be present and let today's problems be enough for today. We all have a lot going on, and there's a lot of problems that we experience in the present day. We don't need to bring all of our problems from the past and contaminate the present by what happened to us before. The other thing I want you to do is to remember the video that we talked about turning failure into success. I want you to turn disadvantage into advantage. For example, if something terrible happened to you in the past, chances are you learned something significant that can help you be a better person in the present, and I want you to use that to your advantage rather than your disadvantage. I want you to now focus on not so much what happened, but what did I learn? I want you to ask yourself, what did I learn from that experience? In a video that's coming up, we're going to be talking about finding meaning in your life experiences, and that is a key to finding meaning in the things that you've experienced in your life. And then what I'd like you to do is every time you come up with a worst case scenario, I want you to balance it with at least one best case scenario. And by doing these things, you will learn to slowly rid yourself of the baggage that comes from your negative past experiences. Now, as I said, the past includes things that happened 40 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 5 minutes ago. Let's say that you were to go to the bank and the teller treats you mean, so mean that you want to transfer all of your money to another bank as soon as you get outside. That's a negative past experience. Don't let it ruin your day. You need to retell that story in such a way that it causes you to lose all that baggage, lose all that negativity, and feel more positive about that. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk about in one of the next videos. You don't have to live a negative past. You don't have to carry baggage around from your negative past experiences. From this video and in the next few videos, we're going to be focusing in on this topic particularly so that you don't have to carry around that baggage and you can feel better about yourself and you can have a more happy present day.